Okay, and last but not least, I'll share my screen so we can get all of the materials up for you to see. Okay, perfectamundo. I still don't see Mike Ramsey, so Jan, feel free to kick us off here.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'll fill in until Mike Ramsey is able to join us. Hopefully that is soon. This is the fourth quarter meeting of the Rutland Emergency Management Committee, and we're glad that you're all able to join us tonight.
Yeah, did you say fourth?
Did I say fourth?
I think you did.
Isn't it the fourth?
No, it's the first one of the new year.
Oh, excuse me. The first quarterly meeting. Thanks for correcting that. So we'll start off with the voting member roll call, and I'll turn that over to Maggie.
Okay, so the way this works, I will shout out a town name, give it a few seconds for folks to respond, and then move on to the next one. And I will try to not be as fast as I usually am. Okay, so let me pull up the town so I make sure I'm not forgetting anyone. Okay, so do we have anyone representing Benson tonight? Anyone from Brandon? Anyone from Castleton? Anyone from Chittenden?
Bob Case and I are both on.
Awesome, thank you, Jan. Anyone from Clarendon? Anyone from Danby?
Tom Johnston, Danby.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for joining us tonight. Mm-hmm. Anyone from Fairhaven? Anyone from Hubbardton? And I know for a fact we don't have anyone from Ira because the paperwork got lost in the shuffle and they can't get it to me until the new year. So anyone from Killington? Anyone from Mendon? Anyone from Middletown Springs?
Yes, here.
Yes, Chris, I did see you pop up. Welcome. Anyone from Mount Holly?
John McCann, Mount Holly.
John, nice to see you. Anyone from Mount Tabor? Anyone from Paulet?
John Weiss is here for Paulet.
Jackie Becker from Paulet.
Oh, wonderful. 2 people from Paulet. Lovely to meet you, John. I'm happy to join you to the team. Anyone from Pittsford? Anyone from Pulteney?
Aaron Kerber.
Hi, Aaron. Good to see you. Anyone from Proctor?
Kevin Melanger's here.
Hi, Kevin. Anyone from Rutland City?
Bill Lovett.
Bill. Anyone from Rutland Town?
Marty Wasserman.
Excellent. Hi, Marty. Anyone from Shrewsbury?
Jack Perry from Shrewsbury.
Jack, nice to see you. Anyone from Sudbury? Anyone from Tinmouth? Anyone from Wallingford? Anyone from Wells?
Todd Fenton.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for joining us tonight. Anyone from West Haven? And last but not least, anyone from West Rutland? Okay, excellent. That goes it for the voting members. 27 towns feels like a lot, and then you remember the Northeast Kingdom has like 50 something, so this could be much more painful. Anyone who is in the room from the public or whose name I have not said so far, please take a moment to unmute and introduce yourself. I guess
And
I will hand it off to, yes, Heather, please start us off.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is Heather Rigney from Vermont Department of Health.
Yep, and Heather is one of our guest speakers tonight, so thank you so much for joining us. Eric, I'll pass the baton to you.
Sure. My name is Eric Pulver, and I'm with the Rutland District Office of the Vermont Department of Health.
Thank you, Eric. You will also be presenting with Heather tonight. And Tyga.
I'm Tyga Christie, Vermont Emergency Management Southern Regional Coordinator. Good to see you all.
Yeah, excellent. If there's anyone else who I missed, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Hey everyone, it's Abby with Rutland Regional Medical Center.
Abby, so sorry. Oh my goodness. Thank you for being here. Okay. So with that, Jan, I suppose we can move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, so we officially have a quorum and we can conduct business. So the next agenda item is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. If there's no comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve it.
So
Motion
moved.
to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? If hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Okay, agenda is approved. Then we need to approve the minutes of our last meeting, which was on September 27th. Maggie sent those minutes out. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. All right, next is announcements, and I think that's you, Maggie.
Yep, it sure is.
Okay.
So let me switch screens here for a moment. Okay. So welcome everyone. Maggie O'Brien, Emergency Management Planner at the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, as most of you know. So sorry for the last minute change in venue, but as I was explaining to the group earlier, stuff happens and suddenly you're $2,000 out of pocket on your car. So these are the things that life loves to throw at us. But anyway, it's actually quite cold and blustery outside, so maybe you're enjoying the fact that you can stay home and warm and cozy tonight. So hopefully no complaints from the audience there. So a couple of announcements. Over the last fiscal year, we've made several changes to our bylaws, and I thought I would take a brief moment just to review these changes and why we made them. So change number 1, we extended the local emergency planning committee term to 3 years. It was originally a 1-year term, but on the advice of Bob Morlino, our current LEPC rep, it was recommended that we extend it to 3 years in order to match his appointment to the State Emergency Response Committee. So as you can see here, I have the text of the original bylaws in white, and then the changes, anything that's been crossed out is with a slash through it, and then anything that's been added is in pink text. So pretty straightforward. We slashed out annually elect, and now we have it as once every 3 years. Change number 2, we added language specifying voter membership turnover, and that's the language you see on the screen here. The basic premise being that if one of the members from a town needs to step down, then the town has to find a replacement representative and get a signed reappointment form to me within 60 days. So, fun fact, after I sent out the bylaws in the email that was sent at around 4:50 this afternoon, I realized I sent out a version without this language. It's just something I totally forgot to add. So I've quickly put that back in, and basically just ignore the version you got in that email from this afternoon. I will send the correct version of the bylaws in the email with the minutes that I will type up. I will also make a point of adding this to our website, and I will include the link in the email once it's live. And the final change that we made, changing quorum requirements. This was the very exciting one that we were all so looking forward to. So thanks to Vermont law, we were able to change a quorum from being a majority to being something more manageable as long as it was above 20%. And we formally agreed on 11 out of 54 voting members based on the math and rounding up. So much easier to reach quorum now and actually make decisions. In fact, I'd be willing to wager that we're probably going to be able to do it every time now, especially since we still have our proxies. So really, we only need 5 or so people to meet it, 5 or 6. But don't let that discourage you from coming to committee meetings, because otherwise I'd be very sad. So with that being said, like I mentioned, copies are going to be on the website, and I'll send those out. And ignore the in-person part because we did not have an in-person this time. Yay. Okay, and other announcements. So related to our binary blizzard buildup. So we have a finalized calendar for activities we're going to be doing in 2024, and I thought I would take a minute to show that off to everyone real quick. I did distribute this in the email that I sent earlier today. So you can take a closer look at it on your own time, but here's a high-level overview. So what we have here is a timeline. The top bar is going to be your month, and then you'll have the basic details, the date, what the event is, what the format is, the time. Sometimes it's exact, sometimes it's a range, such as day versus night. And if that's the case, those details will be solidified as we get closer to that date. We also have the key partners that are going to be involved. Relationship to B3. Now, I added this column because I thought it would be useful to put into perspective why we're doing the things we're doing, and what relationship they have to this broader exercise we're going to participate in 2 years. So there's definitely that significance, but it's also worthwhile to keep in mind that these events have value on their own too, right? So taking shelter training for the sake of shelter training and brushing up on your skills is just as valuable as knowing it for a full-scale exercise like binary blizzard. And the last thing I want to go over real quick, I added a participation ranking column. Now, I have a long explanation in this text box to the right that I won't read over. But essentially, I added a number 1, 2, or 3 based on how important it was for people to get involved in order to make the intent of the activity successful. So, for example, the REMC meetings they had a 2 ranking for participation by default because we have more than a few people participating. We usually have a guest speaker involved, and we don't want to leave our guest speakers hanging dry, right? Like, we want people to actually come and learn from them. And it's basically a metric to tell you that a moderate attendance is needed in order to at least garner some benefits from the activity. Lower than that is more of your standard, like, hey, you can attend if you're able, but don't bend over backwards if you can't make it. And then 3 is all hands on deck. I want absolutely everyone to join if possible because it's a tabletop or it's a bigger event that requires key partners interacting on site so that we can simulate conditions and simulate responses and learn from that through after action reports and so forth. So again, you can read through that in this box to the right, but I will use this calendar to tell you what some of our upcoming events are. So obviously the meeting we have tonight. On the 17th, that is this upcoming Sunday. So I am excited to finally announce, and I did send out this email a couple weeks ago, but the Red Cross has finally arranged for some shelter trainings in the Rutland region, which I know was in high demand after the flooding this summer. So there's 2 courses, the Shelter Fundamentals, which will be in the morning, and the Shelter Management course, which is in the afternoon. You can take one or both, depending on how you feel, how much time you have. It'll be in person at the Castleton Fire Department. And yeah, it's going to be a good time. I'll make sure everyone has food and it'll be great. So the link for that, I believe, was included in that email, but I can send that out again. And if I take a moment to grab it at some point here, I'll probably throw it in the chat. So that's our event for the month, the shelter trainings. for January, we have a long-term power outage tabletop exercise, incidentally hosted by FEMA. I got very excited when I saw that because that's basically what our binary blizzard activity is, right? So the thing was, it originally had a virtual component, but then we had what we thought was a conflict with Tyga being able to join us, and then that ended up not being a thing. But long story short, we decided that joining virtually wasn't going to add much value to the activity, that it would be much more beneficial to have everyone in person and just collaborate that way. So mark your calendars for that. That's one that's ranked as a 3 because I want all hands on deck. So please keep your eyes on your inboxes so you can be aware of when that's coming out. And the Public Works Mutual Aid Agreements review. So as you may be aware, once every 2 years, we are to review and potentially modify our Public Works Mutual Aid Agreement based on past performance. This past summer with the floods, we finally got the opportunity to put that into practice. And I want to take this roundtable to kind of go over what happens with this activation and if we can take away any lessons learned and if there's any way we can modify the agreement to make it run smoother the next time. Although I must say I was very impressed with the towns that did participate in this because they went through the process without a hitch. Despite us not looking at it in some time. So very proud of you guys there. And let's see, March is pretty busy, but the important thing is Vulnerable Populations Protocol, another thing that we review annually as part of our local emergency management plan season. That will also be on the books for about mid-month. So again, this calendar will be sent out, or it has been sent out already, rather. And the last thing I want to touch upon real quick before transitioning to our guest speakers. So you'll notice we have a hot topic meeting for the Vermont Healthcare Emergency Preparedness Coalition. And I'll leave it to our guest speakers to elaborate on what that is and its significance. But if we have enough interest following our presentation, enough questions to be answered, then this is something we are likely to throw together for you guys to participate in. So with that, I am going to hand it over to our guest speakers. I'll stop sharing my screen. I'll hand it over to our guest speakers, Heather and Eric, to discuss the Health Operations Center and what role that plays during a disaster, how they activate, and what kind of tasks that they execute. So take it away, guys.
Great. Bear with me for 1 second while I bring up our slide deck. All right, well, first of all, thank you all for having us. My name is Heather Rigney, and I am with Vermont Department of Health's Division of Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Injury Prevention. And joining me is Eric Pulver, who is the Office of Local Health EP Specialist that serves your region. I'm sure you know him from many REMC meetings. We are here today to give you an overview of Vermont Department of Health operations and how both your local office and DEPRIP would interface with you during public health emergencies. So I'm going to kick it over to Eric to start us off. And Eric, if you just want to tell me to advance slide whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Yep. So we're here to, like Heather was saying, is kind of give you guys a little bit of an overview. And I thought this was a real important topic to bring to the Rutland REMC, as I have been, here for almost a year now, and kind of giving some VDH side, information. And I thought just a formal presentation would be really good. So Heather, you can go to the next slide.
Right. For some reason, we're not advancing. There we go.
Yep, there we are. So just a couple of other things. So I'll briefly touch on just basically what VDH is and some of our areas and partners that we work with from the federal all the way down to our local levels. And then Heather will take over and do some more on what DEPRIP does in our emergency preparedness and response. And then we'll finish off with some questions and give you some more contact information for myself and Heather. So next slide. So about us. So the health department in Vermont, we are housed underneath the Agency of Human Services. And so as part of that, we work with other departments underneath the AHS. Some of those include the Department of Mental Health, Children and Families, Department of Corrections, and so on and so forth. Next slide. And so within within VDH, excuse me, there are several divisions, offices, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But for you all, a couple of the most important ones are going to be the district offices, where I am out of, which is in Rutland, which is underneath the Office of Local Health. And then there is the Division of Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Injury Prevention, as we like to call DEPRIP. And then you might be able to do a little bit other stuff, maybe with the chief medical examiner during a MCI event, or environmental health if we're going to be doing some stuff with climate change. And so you can go on next slide, Heather. So the Department of Health, we do just a tremendous amount of things in the community and within the state of Vermont. I'm not going to go through all of them because we would be here for probably days and days. But one of the main focuses of the Department of Health is on prevention. And so we would, that's our sort of number one goal, is to prevent a lot of sort of disparities in health or any other sort of things like that, like infectious diseases and so on. But for you all, I'm not going to go through everything, but specifically for the REMC here, one of our core tenets is that we do educate and inform Vermonters about health and safety initiatives. A lot of the normal public health ones are like healthy eating and exercise. But we do a lot, obviously, as we're here, on personal preparedness, safety, and general preparedness for disasters and anything else that might happen. And a few other areas that we do also work with, especially, within DEPRIP and within local offices, is that we do prepare for and respond to public health emergencies and threats. And those could be anything from, the floods that we saw, natural disasters, all the way to bioterrorism or any other chemical or biological, radiological, nuclear events that might happen. And with that, one of our main goals also is to provide the public with the information to be able to stay safe and to be able to monitor their health for the long term. During the floods, one of our primary goals was to get water test kit information and just test kits in general out to the public so they could test their wells and their spring waters to make sure that their water was still safe. And then one of our core, absolute most important things that we do is actually working on health equity and making sure that there is equity in all of the policies that are going out within VDH and just in the general public. We really do want to reduce any inequities that we run across, especially anything that has to do with any sort of socioeconomic disadvantage or any social injustice, racial injustice or anything like that. So next slide, Heather. So VDH obviously is going to cover all of Vermont, but we're separated into 12 district offices. Most notably here, you've got Rutland Rutland County is one district office, and just north of us is Middlebury. Middlebury District Office up there in Middlebury. That's notable because we'll talk about a little more later the Medical Reserve Corps. We have a joint Medical Reserve Corps between Middlebury and Rutland. And so we have to share those volunteers between the two counties. And so district offices do a whole lot of things as well, but one of our primary goals is to partner with all of the local community entities that we can, everything from, you all here at municipalities and sort of EMDs and everything like that, all the way through volunteer agencies, nonprofits, schools, and other community organizations. So that way we can improve the health of our local populations. So next slide. And we'll talk a little bit about some of our other partners from the federal, state, and local levels. So at the federal level, one of our primary partners is going to be the Department of Health and Human Services. And specifically within DHHS, we're going to work with the Office of Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, or ASPR as we like to call them. And we work a lot with the Office of Emergency Management within ASPR, specifically that Medical Reserve Corps is run at the federal level through ASPR. And then we also work very closely with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, specifically out of the Office of Public Health Preparedness and Response. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have some capabilities to respond to public health emergencies, like any sort of bioterrorism. And then we would be working with other federal law enforcement agencies like the U.S. Marshals or the FBI or Homeland Security. Next slide, Heather. And within the state, we do also work with pretty much everyone we can, but some of our most notable ones are going to be sort of public safety, the Vermont State Patrol, and also VEM, TIGA, obviously specifically within here. But we also work a lot with the Agency of Agriculture, Natural Resources, Transportation. I could go on and on and on. And also we work with the Vermont National Guard. And obviously, since we are the Department of Health, we work incredibly closely with all of the hospitals that are within Vermont. Obviously, most notably, we work very close in hand with Rutland Regional Medical Center. And then also the American Red Cross, which you have a training on Sunday for. So they are also another close partner that we work with. And you can go to the next slide, Heather. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about what I do as a district office emergency preparedness specialist. So one of my primary roles is to actually sort of work as a liaison between local agencies, you all, and also DEPRIF. And if in a response, I would also work with getting information from the local community, you and your towns, and getting that information to our Health Operations Center, which we'll talk about a little more in a little bit here. Some other aspects that I do is basically work with anyone on their planning at all, and I bring a public health lens to that. So it's a little bit of a different way of viewing preparedness and emergency management, and I can help to sort of take that sort of public health lens and kind of look at stuff and being able to do that. We also will organize and evaluate any sort of emergency management exercises. So we all are trained in Homeland Security exercise and evaluation. We also, just do general training on personnel and these sort of public health and preparedness issues. And like I said earlier, we are a first point of contact during any sort of incident to be able to get information upstream to get that up to the Health Operations Center. And next slide, Heather. And we do all sorts of other things, but most notably here, we do a lot of running of the Medical Reserve Corps, which we work a lot on preparedness education. We've got some big programs with Stop the Bleed and with reflectors with Be Bright. Those will be a lot of areas that we're going to be working on over the next couple of years. But we also will do a lot of things for cold and warm shelters. I know you all have been hearing from Maggie about hot weather preparedness and doing some of that stuff. That'll be some areas that also the Medical Reserve Corps will help with. And we do, it's an all volunteer unit. And so you don't have to worry about if you request any Medical Reserve Corps volunteers to have liability or anything like that insurance for them. Because if the deployment is approved, VDH, we will cover, that kind of stuff for our volunteers. And outside of that, basically, I'm sort of DEPRIP's boots on the ground, if you want to say. I will be the one that sort of organizes things at a local level. So I would sort of be able to work with you all if there's something we need to put out a point of dispensing area, if we need to get any prophylactics out or any sort of medication, if there's something going on to the general public, I'll be doing some of that stuff. And we do a lot of staffing for those multi-agency resource centers that we saw during the flood. Next slide, Heather. And so I personally, I try and be as active in everything I can be. I've been obviously here at these REMC meetings. I'll go to LEPC meetings, and I will go to, I just was at Rutland Regional Medical Center's Emergency Preparedness Committee that Abby runs. I'm also on a few other statewide boards like Vermont's school safety, school crisis planning team, so I can get some information from that. And one of the core areas that we do work with is what Maggie was talking about earlier, the Vermont Healthcare and Emergency Preparedness Coalition. So that is a coalition of a lot of, not every, we're trying to get everybody, but a lot of the sort of healthcare, hospitals, EMS, long-term care facilities, all those kind of things to come together to sort of talk about large-scale emergency preparedness, and we're all kind of on the same page. And there's a lot of things here that we can do. Heather can actually talk about that more if you have questions. She's a little bit more tuned in for that than I am. And so, next slide. I'm going to talk briefly about the town health officers, just real quick here. They are not at all staff of VDH. Just want to make sure that's clear. They are selected, they're recommended by your select board within your local towns. And a lot of you probably know what they do, but they do some things like investigating public health hazards within your municipality. And then they sort of to prevent and remove, any sort of hazards like that. And they want to also mitigate some of those significant public health risks. They do some investigations of complaints from rentals and stuff, and those other kind of things like that. And sort of just, they're the enforcement of local municipal health laws and rules and stuff like that. So next slide real quick. And I'll go a little bit more in depth into the Medical Reserve Corps, which myself and my counterpart in Middlebury, we are the leads for our local MRC unit. We do a lot of things. We have activities going almost all of the time. Some of our notables at the moment are within Rutland City. There is what we call the Outreach Care Team, and we have a Medical Reserve volunteer on that team. We are partnering with Rutland Free Clinic, Community Health, Rutland Mental Health, and also Turning Point within Rutland. And we're sending out teams that Project Vision and Commander Prouty over there at Rutland City Police have sort of found areas where they're going to have the most vulnerable populations of people who are experiencing homelessness within Rutland City. And we are able to get them resources directly to where they are. So in our case, it's going to be basic wound care. It'll be visible inspections and making sure that their health is okay. If there is anything that needs further medical attention, they can actually, the Medical Reserve Corps volunteer can recommend that they go either to the Rutland Free Clinic to be able to be seen, or recommend them to go to the emergency room at Rutland Regional Medical Center. So that's one of our current big projects that we're working on. Other projects that we do are going to be sort of general training. I think Maggie did send out a training that we did with our Medical Reserve Corps on ICS for Thanksgiving. That was something we did back in November. And they can be opened up to you all if you are interested in doing some of those kind of trainings, but we'll do shelter trainings. We did a joint training with my counterpart up in St. Albans on disability and access and functional needs, and sort of preparedness and planning. So there's a whole lot of things we can do. And if you have any other questions, you can, let me know, and we can sort of work on, see what other areas that we can help you with. Next slide, Heather. Actually, I think it's now Heather's turn to take over and talk more about emergency preparedness at the central level and response in the HOC.
Hey, lucky me, it's my turn. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for giving a great overview of Offices of Local Health. I'm privileged enough to be the liaison between DEPRIP and OLH, and know that our 12 EPs work tirelessly to make sure that not only towns, but community partners, both public and private, have the information that they need to be prepared. So I hope that you get a lot of information out of this and that you definitely foster a stronger relationship with the OLH offices. From the point of view of DEPRIP, which is our central office based out of Burlington, one of the primary functions that we focus on is surveillance. Unlike VEM, which has an all hazards approach to emergencies, VDH conversely focuses on what we call public health emergencies. So those can be things that are caused by various states of disease, whether they be foodborne, waterborne, vector-borne, or something akin to COVID that, you know, can be transmitted by a variety of different means. And part of what we do is routine surveillance through our hospitals and our local health centers. To get some stats on people coming in with various illnesses, making sure that our VDH laboratory is tracking certain reportable diseases and communicating those up to our leadership so that we can mount a response if it's necessary, because we want to catch it on a local level before it becomes epidemic or pandemic proportions. That being said, we have what's called a Health Operations Center. Most of you are very familiar with the Emergency Operations Center, or SEOC. VDH runs a Health Operations Center, HOC, sometimes in parallel with the SEOC, depending on the nature of emergencies. Sometimes we will partially or fully stand up alone, and that often depends on the nature of the emergency in question. So the Health Operations Center does oversee and coordinate statewide public health responses, and it assists in coordinating medical response operations for our hospitals and our healthcare entities. And we do the medical response in conjunction with the Vermont Healthcare and Emergency Preparedness Coalition, which incorporates all of our hospitals in Vermont, the VA Medical Center, as well as Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, because they take a lot of our Vermont healthcare traffic across the border. The VHEPC itself, as Eric mentioned, is a coalition. We include VDH, Vermont Emergency Management, Emergency Medical Services. We have representation from VAS. We have representation from DALE, a lot of different agencies. There are a number of independent organizations that are also part of that coalition. But they are tied very closely to the work that the health department does. And they also help to manage our medical operations network, which is our communications network that we employ within the Health Operations Center in times of emergency. So the Health Operations Center does get activated. It can be in support of a local or regional emergency, or something that's statewide or national in proportion. We activate when local resources are overwhelmed, and we have 5 different activation levels, all the way from normal state to monitoring, to partial activation, to full activation, and so on and so forth. We have moved in recent years from an in-person Health Operations Center, which was grounded in the Zampiri building in Burlington, to what we call a virtual HOC, which means that most of us work from our respective workstations and coordinate online, as I think the majority of us do nowadays. All right, so this is just showing the parallel operations of the Health Operations Center and the state EOC. You'll see on the right in the gray box that the EOC has a modified EOC structure where they have the situational awareness section, planning section, mission and resource support, and then center support section. So VDH, when the SEOC is activated, sends a liaison that sits in that mission and resource support section. It's either our Deputy Commissioner of Health or the Director or Deputy Director of DEPRIP that sits in that spot. And they liaise back to our Health Operations Center, which again works in parallel with the SEOC. So the larger chart shows what our structure looks like, and we follow the more traditional SEOC structure with operations planning, logs, and finance admin. If you're talking in terms of traditional emergency support functions or state support functions, we are the primary lead for ESF6, which is Health and Medical Services. We also support ESF6, which is the Mass Care Division. There are all other aspects of us that touch on ESF11, which would be agriculture, food resources, animal care, so on and so forth. So this is just a list of some recent public health events and exercises that we've had full or partial activation for the Health Operations Center with. Just this year, we've had 2 extreme cold weather events, the AHS housing transition for the GA housing, as well as the summer flooding that we have activated the Health Operations Center for. You can see on the right side of this screen, as well as on this next slide, that we have had a prodigious number of activations over the past few years. Anything that's specifically public health emergencies, such as vaping, all the way to things that are more all hazards, such as windstorms and ice storms and so on and so forth. We do set up our HAWK sometimes as part of preparedness exercises, and we will be active in the binary blizzard when that takes place. But we try to keep ourselves pretty sharp in using WebEOC and EM Resource and the other platforms that we would normally operate during a disaster. Vermont Department of Health is also responsible for sending out health alert network, HAN alerts. For those of you who are part of the VT alert system, the HAN alerts are basically the same thing, but they go out to healthcare entities, often to let them know about up and coming diseases, threats to public health. Anytime a hospital is severely impacted by a disease or event, whether it be something like an active shooter or surge capacity or utility failure, these are the means that we use to reach out to healthcare professionals, public health, allied health entities, and let them know situational awareness here in the state. VDH also is responsible for the Strategic National Stockpile. The SNS is something that we can activate in times of public health emergency or general emergency. And in order to have an SNS activation, the governor or his designee needs to put in a request. The health commissioner is usually the one who will reach out directly to ASPR to get stocks of certain medications or supplies and route to the state of Vermont in order to help support a public health emergency. If we have any cities within the state of Vermont that receive public health emergency preparedness funding, those cities can actually do a direct request as well. And some of the things that are available in the SNS stockpile include the types of things that you see on the slide. During COVID, obviously, we were getting lots of personal protective equipment, things like medical support supplies and equipment for hospitals, vaccines, testing. A lot of that is still available, and we're working to disperse it as we speak. It is not, unfortunately, a stockpile for cities and towns to use at need because it was bought with emergency funding. The types of things that we can allocate that for are limited in nature. But there are some things that we keep on hand at a moment's notice to be able to distribute to locales if something were to require an immediate response. So again, some advantages that we have with SNS resources. Because we're tied into a vendor managed system, we can get things much more rapidly than sometimes local communities can. We have series of approved vendors and like-minded equipment, so we can make substitutions. Because we can buy things in bulk, sometimes that allows us to get enough to cover multiple areas at a time. And then ASPR has what they call push packages, which are pre-staged caches of equipment and supplies. So not just vaccines, but the needles and the syringes and the PPE, all to help administer that. In-house, the state owns a variety of resources. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the portable hospital or portable medical asset that we deployed at Rutland Region Medical Center last month and had folks come in and tour. Those are assets that we can deploy to municipalities upon request. If there is a large event that needs supporting, if there is the potential for surge or other type of public health emergency where that could be beneficial. We have smaller tents that we can bring to bear. We have therapeutic support. We have expertise on various topics. Lots of things like tents and heaters and air conditioners and ear monitors and things along those lines. And again, those are all accessed through the Health Operations Center. One of the things we're pretty well known for is our points of distribution, otherwise known as clinics. You saw a lot of those during the pandemic, but those are basically mass prophylaxis clinics. They can be vaccine or pill-based in nature. The pod model was originally developed in the aftermath of 9/11 to be able to take care of things like anthrax emergencies or mass terror events, but they can be expanded and modified for a variety of public health emergencies, both man-made as well as naturally occurring. And open pods are the ones that serve the general public. We have the closed pod system, which is really designed to help mission critical assets like our police, our fire, our EMS, our schools, in order to make sure that continuity of operations is maintained. And all of our OLH staff train regularly on setting up pods. Our MRC volunteers are part of those drills and exercises. So again, we build in layers of support through our VDH training to make sure that we can serve you as a community. So we often get the question of how would you reach the Vermont Department of Health in an emergency? We like one-stop shopping as much as the next person. So we always tell all of our municipalities, our EMDs, that the best line of defense is to reach out to us through the Vermont Emergency Management's Watch Officer Program. If you don't have their number, please put it in your phone on speed dial. These folks are awesome and they staff that line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unlike VDH that carries on normal day-to-day operations. So you reach out to these folks, whether it's morning, noon, or night, let them know that you have something, and based on the nature of the emergency that you are experiencing, if there is any public health aspect of it, whether it's disease or whether it's water or food related, whether it's an environmental emergency that would fall under our environmental health division, VEM is going to reach out to us and give our folks a heads up, and we will decide whether the HOC needs to be activated in response to support that emergency. It's always a great idea to notify your local district office, so Eric or his counterparts elsewhere in the state as well, because they're the boots on the ground. So they can lean forward, helping to identify what the needs are, what the affected parties are. They know the locals in the way that we up at the central office really don't know. So they're a great way of two-way communication, and they can disseminate information back up to us. We can drop information down that they can give out to parties to help you guys prepare and respond and mitigate to the best of your ability. So if you have any further questions, I absolutely welcome those now. I know we're at the very, very tail end of our allotted time. So if you don't have a question now or think you might later, please copy down either Eric's information or my own, and we'd be happy to follow up with you via email.
I did have one question, Tom Johnston and Danby.
Sure, Tom.
So who would have the local authority to be authorized to make the request? Which level of people? Would it be the MD, the select board, the fire chief? Which personnel?
Typically, we would expect that response to come from the emergency management director. We know that that person works closely with all the other parties that you mentioned, but they are the ones that interface with VEM's regional representatives most closely. So they would probably be the ideal authority to make that request up the chain. And Tyga, if that is not correct, let me know. But I know when we get requests, we usually expect the EMD to at least have eyes on it and approval, even if they're not the one making the call.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but I would say that the watch officer is a phone number that's available to people beyond the EMD. So if there's some, if something happens in a moment when the EMD is just not available for whatever logistical reason, fire, EMS, reaching out to the watch officer is also an option.
Yeah, I think when that call comes up, there's a screening process. So, what is the emergency? What resources have you used? Who have you spoken to? That type of thing. So there's some of those checks and balances in place to make sure that it's not being elevated and treated at a state level when there may potentially be human resources or logistical resources locally to affect a response.
Heather, this is Jan. I have a question about communication with towns. A while back, there was a supply of COVID test kits that were sent out to each town, and they were addressed to the attention of the town clerk. There was no communication with emergency management directors at all that was happening. And I didn't know if you've got a list of all the EMDs in each town, but I found out about it about 3 weeks after they came in, and they'd already been distributed. So I think that there's a way that maybe we could tighten that system up a little bit for communication for us, because I might have used them in a different way, but the town clerk didn't think there were any restrictions and she gave them out. So I don't know how, if you're communicating with a town, what's your point of contact with that town? Is it the town clerk or is it the emergency management director?
I think that depends on whether it's during a time of public health emergency or we're kind of in a limbo after state. The emergency has not ended despite what the federal government says, but we are more on a steady state endemic level at this point. I can honestly tell you, Jan, I'm not sure who made that decision that the town clerks would be the points of contact, but I do remember that distribution. I think if it had been at the height of COVID, typically that would have been the EMDs making the request for those and helping to direct where they went. Some of the test kits that came in are ones that we're trying to get more into the hands of the public. And I think they were thinking, strategic locations, pick up at the town hall, pick up at the health department office, pick up at a local library, so on and so forth. But I will bring your feedback back and see if there might be a better way to help coordinate that between town and emergency management level.
My other question has to do with the interrelationship between the state EOC and the HOC. I worked for the health department for 17 years. I was part of the HOC, so I'm aware of that. There are times when I wish we could, quite frankly, bypass the state EOC, but and work directly with the HOC, but I certainly am aware that our requests for assistance need to go up the VEM chain. Eric's comment about him being the first point of contact, I don't know if that might have been a little confusing for people, because I believe, and Tyga, jump in here, that you still want us to, any request, whether it's water test kits, whether it's tetanus shots for whatever, some injuries that are happening, you still want that request to go through the state EOC.
Right. We definitely would want the state EOC to, I should say, be the first point of contact. I would say that the OLH office should be your close second contact, because I think they need to have that situational awareness of what's going on in their community to help support the distribution of materials and supplies and to make sure that things are not lost in translation. So once the Health Operations Center is activated, from our point of view up at the state level, we're going to be coordinating with folks like Eric and others who are in that district office to make sure that the resources we send down are being used properly and that we're getting the right type of information back. So I would say, you know, if you can make 2 calls, have the watch officer be the first one and have the OLH office be the second one.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I will say we have been very blessed that both the COVID and recent flooding have allowed us to work in concert with the SEOC, and we have a lot of lessons learned that we're trying to put into modifications of our emergency operations plan at VDH to smooth out some of the communication bumps and you know, logistical hurdles that we encountered over the past 4 years. I think we have learned a lot. I think we have strengthened our relationship with VEM tremendously, and seen it from a couple of different points of view. Because with Hawk, we were the primary EOC because it was a public health emergency. With the flooding and with the winter storms, the SEOC was the primary because it was all hazards, and we were in a more supporting role.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Are there any other questions for Eric and Heather? Hearing none. Thank you both. It was a very interesting presentation. We appreciate your
Also
time.
resonate, like I know there's been so much.
Absolutely.
I don't know, around Israel.
And I'll just add to Heather's great answer about EOC, SEOC versus local VDH contacts, that one of the reasons that we put the watch officer out there as a first point of contact for time sensitive manners is that that's always going to be a 24/7 active number. And so that's something to think about as you're thinking, is this a call to Eric? Is this a call to the watch officer? How time critical is this? And where are we during an active incident? Or is this a conversation that I'm having with Eric over a period of time? But we like to put that VEM watch officer out there because specifically we know that someone will answer it and be able to get in touch with the people you need at any hour.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, both Heather and Eric. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is our REMC representative reports. And I'm thinking, yep, Maggie's still there. Maggie, do you have a report from Bob Merlino on the SEO or the statewide local emergency planning committee, the LEPC?
Yes, I do, because Bob could not make it tonight.
Right.
And the reason he couldn't make it tonight is actually one of the things I'll be addressing. So the LEPC had their meeting, I believe it was last month. And in addition to electing a new vice chair, Bob kind of gave a preview of this course that he's been teaching about lithium-ion batteries and how to douse those fires and deal with any electric shortages and so forth. He was actually explaining it to me earlier today in a phone call, and it sounded very interesting. And definitely something that I think is going to be more relevant as we start focusing on things like the Global Warming Solutions Act, all of the emissions reductions that we need, and this long-term transfer to EVs. So he's holding several of those over the next few, I think it's weeks or months, including one in Pollitt. So I would say reach out to Bob if that's something you're interested in participating in. Other than that, their next meeting is in January. I think it's the 16th. And just as a general side note, there was some discussion over a huge oil spill in Putney, and then I believe a week or so ago there was that giant fire it was either an oil tanker or something else that was going on in Irisburg that involved the strike team and everything else. So definitely keeping them on their toes, which is always a good thing. Especially since they were a little away from the public eye for a bit there. So that's pretty much all we have in terms of that. Knowing they're alive and well is always a good thing. Jen, did Mike Ramsey ever join?
I don't think so. I haven't seen him.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I haven't seen him either. So I guess I'll take over his representative report as well really quick.
Okay.
So typically the threat hazard identification and assessments, that's something that's conducted in the fall. And on a biennial basis, it also results in the preparation of a stakeholders preparedness report. That report was done last year, so we're all set for this year. And it occurred to me while I was meeting with Mike and Jan prior to our meeting tonight that I had heard nothing about Thyra. So I asked him to follow up on that, and the response that we got from Emily Harris was that basically they have enough information to kind of carry on and make minor updates for the next year or two, not really requiring getting all the stakeholders together. So it's probably a front that's going to be quiet for a little while. But that's, not necessarily a bad thing. I think it means that the EM is staying on top of things, and that's always a good thing to hear. So with that, I will hand it over to Tom. Tom, I doubt you really have anything to report since this is something that happens in the spring. But I'll let you say, I'll give you a moment to say something if you'd like.
Well, of course, I'm eagerly awaiting the the blossoming of spring so that we can have the meeting. But at this point, it's been so long since there was a meeting that there really hasn't been nothing new to report.
Okay, thank you, Tom. All right, that moves us on to some organizational tasks. And the first item are appointments for chair, vice chair, our Thyra SPR representative, and our IPPW representative. I'm not quite sure how to do this because I'm vice chair, but acting chair tonight. So I don't know if I can start it off. What I will tell the group is that Mike and Maggie and I met, and both Mike and I are interested in continuing to function in the chair and vice chair role unless there's someone else that's ready to jump in and take that on.
I'll make the motion that you continue.
And I'll second it.
There's a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will report Michael Ramsey as chair and Jan Soterakis as vice chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, looks like we get to do it again for another year. How about our Thyra SPR representative, who is currently Mike Ramsey? Mike said that he was willing to continue in that. Was that correct, Maggie?
Yes, he did say that. And like I just mentioned, that's something that's going to be on the down low for the next couple of years. So if you want to take over and basically not do anything, here's your chance.
Do I have any nominations for Thyra SPR representative?
Oh, I'll nominate Michael.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Michael's got that job. Then we're up to the IPPW representative, who's currently Tom Johnston. Tom, are you interested in continuing?
Yes, I will.
I'll nominate Tom.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of Tom Johnston as our IPPW representative, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you, Tom. Well, that was pretty easy. All right.
Yeah, so because we extended our term for the LEPC rep to 3 years, with that, you might have noticed that's missing on this list, and that's because I'm taking the start of the 3 years from the previous year when we actually formally elected Bob. So it won't be until, let's see, if this is the second year, it won't be until 25-26, I believe, that we'll actually be doing that again. So he will remain our rep for quite a while to come.
Okay.
Oh, Lord willing.
Maggie, do you want to talk about the resolution for meeting time and place?
Yes. So in this meeting that Jan and Mike and I had, we came to the realization that we don't have a set meeting time in our bylaws, which is fine. I mean, the bylaws themselves say that the REMC will, commit to a time and a place. But the thing with that is we weren't making it very clear outside of our emails to our members. And we're a public body, so we have to do that. So I took the time last Friday, I believe it was, to, or maybe the Friday before, not particularly important, to type up a resolution. It's very legalese. It's very, I was trying to match the style of some examples. Sorry, I'm trying to reorient myself here for a moment. It was sent out among the pre-meeting materials, so if you're really gung-ho to, take a look at it, see if it makes sense to you, see if it's coherent and all that, with all the background and so forth, feel free to do so. But the important part is this last section, which is what I have on the slides, which is that since it's the start of the year, I was wanting to confirm that our current schedule is going to work for everyone anyways. But just to kind of get this down on paper, instead of having it directly in the bylaws, which would require a listening session and then a session to vote, it would just be easier, I think, to have the voting members just pass a resolution that states it in black and white, like, okay, these are going to be our meeting times and days. So the schedule that we've stuck to thus far since starting this committee up a couple of years ago, it's been typically on the second Wednesday of December, that being the first quarterly meeting of the year, and then the remaining quarterly meetings being the last Wednesday of March, May or June, although we've been leaning more towards June lately, and September. So I just stuck with those. We're going to keep it at the 5:30 time as long as everyone agrees that's a time that works for them. Maybe not as important as it was in previous years since our quorum is less, but still something to consider. And that it'll always be in a hybrid format at our regional office. And of course, if there's any deviation from that schedule or that format, like there was today, it will be advertised as soon as possible on our website and on the doors to the Opera House and so forth. Tyga, I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, sorry to be a throwing a potential wrench in here. Last Wednesdays of the month are USAR training, which makes that a difficult time because of the hours of it and travel time for me. And I imagine that I may not be the only person in the REMC who's involved with USAR. And I wonder if that's something to consider, just given the crossover between EMD's first response and potentially USAR as well.
Okay, yeah, that's something I was not aware of. Is there anyone in this committee who is regularly involved in USAR? Could maybe shed a little light on this? Potentially?
I think Bill Lovett would be the only one that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I haven't made the trip up there in so long, just can't get away. So I know typically they're arriving back at the station somewhere between 5 and 6. So Tyga's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with anyone traveling down to the south would likely be in transit or at 5:30 still.
Okay, so we might have to think of an alternative. The main reason I went with the schedule is because that's what we've done historically, and it's normally worked out for people, but we definitely want you or someone else from BEM to be here, Tyga, so why don't you and I meet offline at some point to kind of bounce around a date that would work for you, and then I can bring this back to the committee in March, and we can formally adopt the resolution then.
That sounds great. Sorry to be a complicating factor.
No, this is exactly why we bring it up. If I had gone full steam ahead and we had this voted on, and then you were like, oh, by the way, that would have complicated things for sure. So always good to catch it in advance. So we will not be voting on this today, actually. Most likely the next meeting that we have in March. But when that happens, I'll have Michael sign off on it, and then it'll have a permanent home on our website. So I will just show you where that is real quick. Not particularly important to know right now, but just for the sake of visualization. Here's our beautiful Rutland RPC website that was actually redone relatively recently. I want to say within the past 6 months. So if you go to the board and committees tab towards the top here, which still has the Latin placeholder for the subheading, but you scroll down, you'll see the bar to the left here that says all board and committees, and this is for all of the, well, as it says, boards and committees for the RPC. What you're going to want to do is click on this arrow and scroll down to the Regional Emergency Management Committee. And what that does is filter everything that's REMC related. It's in this case, it's mostly just agenda material and meeting minutes. But the idea is once we get this resolution passed, it'll have a permanent home here. So that way it's in an accessible place, and we'll be better meeting the requirements of open meeting law that way. So yeah, that was the thought behind that. Anyone have any questions or concerns real quick before we move on? Okay, sounds good.
All right, we're at the point where the meeting's open to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to share something? Not sure there's any public here.
Yeah, my thought is probably not.
No. Okay. All right, so our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, March 27th. Are we going to keep that meeting?
We are going to keep that for now, I believe,
okay,
unless there's significant objection to do otherwise. I just don't want to confuse people by saying, oh, we're going to change it and have it different this one time, but then maybe go back to.
Okay.
So let's just keep it the same for now. And if there is any change, then obviously I will make that clear in the save the date notice, as well as when I send out the agenda in March.
Okay, see, Heather has her hand up.
Yeah, before we conclude, I just wanted to address the hot topic in Maggie's training calendar, because I forgot to during the course of my presentation. February 8th, the Healthcare Coalition is going to be sponsoring one of their quarterly meetings, and they are also doing in conjunction with that meeting what we call the Medical Response and Surge Exercise, or MERCY, which is required for all of our hospitals for their CMS requirements. And the topic of the MERCY this year is actually a tabletop exercise for eclipse planning. As most of you know, we do have an full eclipse of the sun that's occurring the first week of April in 2024, and it's going directly over the northern portions of Vermont. So we are doing that tabletop in support of a mass surge event, because we're expecting anywhere from 40,000 up to over 100,000 tourists to hit the northern part of our state during that one day, which I want to say is April 7th, April 8th. The exact date's escaping me. But we are really hoping for participation with our healthcare partners, and we know our hospitals will be involved. But speaking to the select members and the EMDs in the room, if we have EMS participation, I think that would provide huge value added to that exercise. So if you have a public EMS service, I would encourage them to register to participate, because we're going to be talking about what our towns are doing, both for awareness level as well as to ramp up heightened response capabilities and considerations that you might want to make for event planning. So even though Rutland is probably not going to have the level of tourists as, say, Grand Isle, it is possible that as mutual aid you might be called on to provide resources north of us if something were to occur, particularly with the mass exodus and ingress of folks on the road before and after. That's probably more important than anything else, because we're going to have a lot of road traffic and potential for accidents that could be MCI level. So That's what that is. And even though it's not something that we normally, invite EMDs to, I think it's really important to have that level of awareness that this is going on and that planning is in the background.
Heather, just real quickly, is Northern Vermont going to be the best place to see this eclipse?
Unless you want to go to Canada, we're looking, Grand Isle is supposed to be the best viewing in state. The eclipse will actually be fully in effect for a total of 3 minutes there, as opposed to most other parts of the state where you'll only be able to observe it for a matter of a couple of seconds.
Oh, okay.
We've had some hotels that have booked up 4 years in advance, which tells you, astronomy aficionados are really excited about this. The next eclipse, I think, is not supposed to occur for another 30 or so years.
Wow.
It's not something you think about every day. It's not something that's really on our radar, right? Because it doesn't happen every day. But when you start to kind of be like, oh yeah, there's this big event with a lot of people, what kind of things are we going to have to consider to keep people safe on the ground? I mean, it's definitely an important consideration. I know in 2017, when that eclipse happened, it was more so towards the west. And I was trying to see it from my place back in New York, and it just didn't happen. So even though we're a little further south here, it's very exciting to know it'll be kind of right outside our door, so to speak. But thank you for bringing that up, Heather. That's a really, really good point. And I would also encourage everyone to put that down in your calendar. And Heather, can I say they can reach out to you if they want to throw their hat in the ring for that? So they can learn more?
Why don't I throw a link in the chat that folks can, and again, it really is more healthcare specific. But again, if you have any entities in your town that touch base on it, whether it's your EMS or your fire, whether you are a host town to a hospital, have a major health center, I think it's really important, even if you just want to be an observer in that and get more information. So. Bear with me while I look up that link, and I will post it momentarily.
I hadn't really thought about doing a lot of planning for that, but I guess maybe now we should think about it.
I think with our location, definitely the traffic's going to be the main thing.
Right.
Like Heather was saying. I mean, I imagine Route 7 there, like when we have the state fair, except probably 100 times worse. You probably, I might even work from home that day, depending, because I don't want to be anywhere near that. So. Speaking of survey links, so I can buy Heather a little bit more time, I managed to pull up the survey link to register for the Red Cross shelter training. So I'm throwing that into the chat right now. There are only 40 seats, and that's just the capacity of the Castleton Fire Department classroom that it's being held in. Despite the issues with my car, I do intend on being there. Thankfully, despite the issues I described, I can still drive it around to a limited extent. So I will be there to kind of observe, support, learn alongside all of you, as I haven't really taken these courses either. So really looking forward to that. But anyways, 40 seats, only 2 per municipality. So think really carefully about who you want to send if you're interested. And yeah, it'll be a good time. Hope to see you there. And right on cue, there's Heather's link. So take a moment to copy and paste that if you're interested in joining on that February 8th virtual tabletop. I believe that's going to be around the time of our annual spring flooding Q&A as well. So that's something to keep in the back of your head. I'm not sure if it's the same day or not. I would have to double check, but a lot going on, I feel like, in the first 3 months of the new year. I mean, that was definitely the case last year anyway.
Okay, well, if there's no other business, we'll wish everyone a very happy holiday season. We won't see you again until March, but we'll still hopefully see you at some trainings in between here.
Wait a second, Jan. Jan,
sure.
Because we're at quorum, we have to vote to adjourn.
Oh, okay. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. Merry
Happy
Christmas, Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.